Alright, so the comment on the last video was chop it, so we're going to chop it. I may as well make the most of the situation, and before I build a battery, let's just do a tear down on one of these things. Just to be clear, they're about, I think they were like 700 each, or I think I ended up paying, I can't remember if it was 3200 or 3600 for the lot. I got 4 effectively because I needed 48 volts. So just in response to Mr. Cole's comment, chop it, that's what we're going to do. Yep, let me get these out of here. The fourth one's floating around here somewhere. I might actually start with that. We'll heat it up, see if we can get this glue to come unstuck. Try and save the cases if we can, but if not, who cares, right? So they're only cheap batteries at the end of the day. I keep making the mistake of covering up the microphone port on this thing. Anyway, I was heating the battery up to try and loosen the glue, and then all that does is melts the plastic. So this is the quickest way, and hopefully it doesn't go arse up, but like opening an old can with an old can opener. Anyway, let me get this thing apart and let's see what we've got inside. I was about to say that the quality of this thing's actually pretty good, but they're fucking loose in there by the look of it. And as I suspected, they're prismatic cells, but I might not be able to interface with them because it looks like they've got nickel strip on them, unless I find some, well, maybe I can just use the strip that they've already got. Is that me? I hope that wasn't me that just damaged the side of that cell. Oh, let's get this thing apart and have a look, eh? Get this plastic off and have a look, eh? I mean, it was only a cheap battery in the first place, so yeah, that's what I thought. They're only little baby cells. I can still turn that into a pack though, because there's still connectors at either end, and I can splice into their. But it is exactly what we thought. It's the bloody strip is welded straight to the cells. The build quality's not too bad, really. Like, I'm pretty sure, if anything, I've just done some damage to it taking it apart. What size is that cable? I don't think this cable was going to maintain 200 amps at any point. Well, it doesn't have a millimeter rating on it as far as I can tell, but it is silicon coated, so maybe you can get 200 amps out of it. It's fairly, just cover the microphone up again, it's fairly rigidly put together. This little bit of metal is doing a good job of holding it. For all intensive purposes, I can't see any damage other than what I've done to it, so I'll be careful about that in the next ones. It strikes me that snippy down there with the grinder to get an opening and then up. So go to the end opposite the terminals and you get 50mm to play with. So I'll do that with the next few that I pull apart. Got 3 more to go after all. Be interesting to see what BMS is in this thing, and if we can find any data sheet on it. Well, I am impressed. There's a whole metal, they've made an entire metal enclosure for it. So the box, yep, just a dead set simple box, but they've even got like steel holding it together. It's almost like it's compressed. So this was 10 kilowatts, or essentially like 30, I want to say 3,200 or 3,600 bucks, 4 batteries. They have a BMS built in them. I don't know about those solder joints, they look a bit, how you doing? It looks like the BMS can probably take more current than what this thing's been set up for. So we might be able to salvage these BMSs for a different use case. Maybe gift them away if somebody wants one. I'm going to have 4 of them. I've got a JK BMS out the back, so I could turn these 4 batteries into a single 10 kilowatt battery. I reckon that's what it's destined for. Anyway, let's get this BMS apart, and oh, that's a bit, how you doing? It does look to me, only some of those diodes are populated. I wonder if we could populate those diodes and then use these other balance ports. Let's get it out. Let's stop making assumptions and let's get it out of there. It'll make the battery safe too if I get these leads off, so that unless I drop some steel on it, it's the only way it's going to short out. Well, I got the BMS out, and what? It's a Jabata BMS, only 100 amp BMS, the cheeky buggers. So that's the first That's the first thing about this that's doesn't sit well. This battery was meant to have a 200 amp discharge, which maybe it could do peak. Actually, let's check that. Is that true? 200 amp hour. Doesn't say. Doesn't actually say what the discharge is. I'm pretty sure the data sheet said 200 amp hour though, which that's obviously not the case. Although I didn't go and get the data sheet for this this BMS yet, so I'll do that. Very basic. Doesn't have any interfaces other than the balance itself, so it doesn't have a temperature probe, so it didn't have that sort of protection. Not that that's a problem in Australia, but if you bought these batteries elsewhere, it might be a problem. But what I got so excited about pulling the battery apart that I didn't realise this is a 200 amp battery, and there's 1, 2, 3 cells. So one or two things is happening here. We always suspected that these were second-hand cells that make these batteries up. One or two things is happening. These things are bigger than 70 amp hour each, or this isn't a 200 amp hour battery. So if they were, say that they were 75, 80 amp hour battery cells, you know, then potentially you'd say, well, they're second-hand, therefore they've got slightly less capacity, and you know, you would make the battery slightly larger. But I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to find out that they're not the size they say they are. Well, this isn't looking good. I've tried two different code scanning websites, and these cells do not show up on any of them. So the code is correct, it's formatted correctly, it's 3.2 volt. I'm not going to put that on there because I don't need to create a short. It just says, yeah, like production date and everything seems to work out okay. This is the drama, is that code, like, it's not looking up something in a database, right? So like, in IT speak, this would be like doing it on the client, and that's a terrible idea because it means it can be interfered with. That code can say whatever the hell they want. You're trusting that code. Like, it's not looking it up and saying the database says X. Like, it's not a unique ID. It's literally the information gets passed out to be whatever this says. So I don't think you can actually trust the codes anyway, but it's a little bit worrying that they don't say their size, so that's deeply concerning. Anyway, I think the only thing I can do is disassemble it and actually see if it says on the side of the package. Otherwise I might have to go and buy a load tester or something and load test these things. Anyway, I'll rip into it. Well, that's the steel enclosure they stuck in, so it wasn't just taped together, and some effort's gone into that, which is nice. So hopefully that's an indication that our suspicions are correct, and in fact these are second hand rather than undersized. There's no data on these things at all. Bugger. You know what that means, eh? We've got no choice but to load test these things, try and figure out exactly how big they are, but I don't have the equipment for that right now. I wonder if I could use one of the shunts. I got one of the BMV 712s. I could use one of the shunts and we could discharge this thing. Let's do that, eh? I want to build this into a bigger battery anyway. So I could use I could assemble it into the bigger battery. That's not going to take much. I've got a spare shelf, I've got the spare BMS. So splice these wires in, parallel these things up so that they can be joined together. What I'll do is I'll just carefully remove one of those bolts. When I say carefully, I mean like brute force, just aggressively tear it off. I'll assemble it into a 48 volt battery and we'll put it on the bottom shelf. These are conveniently hanging out one side. The spare wire, let's face it, that should have been trimmed down to keep the resistances as low as possible, but it wasn't. I'll splice into it and use my big JK, the 200 amp JK BMS, and we'll attach it to a BMV 712 and discharge it and see how much power is actually in it, and we'll go from there. So far, they've put effort into that. It was built nice, so you know, like sort of, I don't know, there's some questionable stuff here. The QR code doesn't read the actual capacity of the batteries, which is alarming. But that's really the only thing that stands out as a concern. Like, they've put sheets in between. It's not just taped together, it was actually physically locked together. There was some form of compression when, I mean, that cap just screws on. So I don't know. Well, I think we'll end it there. Like, a little bit, how do you say it? A little bit disappointed that I can't identify the cells, but let's just do a load test and see how it goes.